So if you can tell which one of these is my signature, you're welcome.
Which one is?
I think it's down here somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Well, at least you signed his on the white rather than across Joe Boyd. Joe Boyd will be very annoyed with the...
Joe's doing so well, he won't give a shit.
Okay.
He really is doing well. He sold about 100,000 copies of his book.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's not bad.
Do you want this, Terry?
I'll put,
yes.
Where do you want to put it? On you?
So we're going to do this in as relaxed a way as we talked last time, okay?
Yeah.
But you know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're really interested in going right back to some of the things you told us the last time we were here about how you first got interested in and discovered the medium and that almost the origins of your interest in it. So the stories you told around that.
Well, in a way, you need to know some of the backgrounds of that, I think. When I came to London in 1960, I decided to be a photographer, and I made out as a freelance. It was quite hard work in the beginning, getting work, but after 5 or 6 years, I was working for sort of major publications, doing what you might now call documentary photography, which includes everything from rock and roll to car accidents, you name it. As the end of the first half of the 60s approached, I found I was getting less and less interested in working for the man, if you like. And other things that were going on got more interesting, like art, promotions, music, sex, poetry, jazz, all the things that make a quiet life.
Yeah.
So much so that by the time I got to 1966, I had a choice. It was either go on being a photographer with a side interest in promotions and events and that sort of thing, or turn it around the other way and put my camera down and concentrate on the events, because one of the events that I was intensely interested in was the starting of International Times, which was like an underground newspaper. And that was like filling a gap where a medium was required, and a group of us got together and started the paper, which was a fortnightly, and it did quite well. But that takes me up to the end of '66, where IT, that is International Times, was growing and multiplying quite fast, and I found that I was very interested in the International Times as a medium, but also in other things like a series of benefits that we did in the church hall in Notting Hill, which led on to become the UFO Club, which was once a week on Friday nights in the West End, all night psychedelic club. It was quite the first of its kind.
Was it centred on music, or was it broader than that?
Oh, it was broader than that. The music is you couldn't have it without music. But that was where light shows were originally put together with music. And that
was that with Mark Boyle and
Mark Boyle and the Soft Machine.
Yeah.
and Joe Gannon and the Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
The two bands running side by side, if you like. Mark Boyle, he had a very creative approach, using all sorts of bodily fluids and other items to expand what you could do with projectors, really. So, in my view, one of the critical elements that caused the whole thing to go bang was the introduction of light shows. The first light shows in a relaxed environment were actually put on by Gustav Metzger in the early 60s, long before rock and roll came on the scene. There was just a plug for Gustav.
Yeah, I'm sure he'd appreciate it.
I've lost the thread of it. Give me a prompt.
Well, you're leading up to, you moved away from being a photographer into setting up the UFO Club, and you're interested in the International Times as a medium. And what we're looking towards, I think, is your encounter with video as a medium.
Yeah,
and
sound and image.
Yeah.
Flourish.
Yeah.
Flourishing sound and image
good.
of the UFO.
Well, I realised that by the mid-60s, I got very interested in media as in many forms, not just one medium. For instance, happenings was another sort of event that you could treat as a medium and see what happened.
So was there like an environment? You were interested in environments, but you were interested in the mediumness of them, what they offer,
Yeah.
the opportunities they offer for connectedness and interactions and engagements.
And systemic inputs and outputs. It was a very free and open time, so all sorts of what we now call research flourished. Some of it worked. At the end of '66, I made one or two false moves and landed up in jail for dope. And I spent the summer of love actually in Woodman Scrubs. It's ironic.
How unfortunate. I'm sure you made up for it.
I did when I got out.
What did you learn in there?
I learned that there are no colours in prison. Actually, I read quite a lot of stuff, Marshall McLuhan, Norbert Wiener, and that theoretical basis of cybernetics. And I was just longing to get my teeth into something when I came out of jail.
Well, what led you to pick those things up whilst you were in jail? Had the seeds of an interest in that been sown before, or did it happen whilst you were incarcerated?
The seeds were sown from about 1960 onwards in my case. Just because I happened to be Try again. We did take two on that one.
Yeah, no worries. You pick it up wherever you like. But
What in the hermetic environment of the prison stimulated that? So you'd already had the interest in this developing kind of understanding, the conceptualization of your behaviour in media, yeah. But something about going to prison pulled that as an interest to the foreground,
or it was just the opportunity to focus on it?
I think it was the opportunity to be in a situation with little external stimulus. Nowadays, the brain would take over and create hallucinations. In those days, it was just well, for instance, halfway through my 6-month sentence, I went to the appeal court in the back of a police van, and I remember looking through the little slits, the windows in the van, at how bright the traffic lights were, and the tail lights and the neon in Piccadilly Circus. I was astonished, and it was because I hadn't seen anything in colour for 3 months. The effect of coloured lights, I mean, it might have been connected in some way with light shows, I don't know. But it was very striking. And I didn't enjoy my time in jail.
I don't suppose you did. But you came out with obviously this awareness of how important colour, the experience of colour is, but also with this new theoretical understanding of some of the things, some of the fascinations and interests you'd already begun to experience before.
Yeah. So I came out of jail, and my girlfriend Susie was at the same time as I was in jail. She was in the nut house. So we were both very pleased to get out of our respective situations, and that was about early December 1967. And after 3 weeks, we pocketed what money we'd got and went to Heathrow to get off the first plane going anywhere. We ended up in...
Sorry, I've got it.
We ended up in Casablanca, which is... It's a romantic name. It wasn't a particularly romantic place. But we drove around that part of Europe. I don't know, Casablanca's in Morocco, but let's be generous. And later I found myself in a mountain town called Rieti in central Italy, trying to co-organise a carnival. It was February, there was snow on the ground. Not the ideal circumstances for a carnival. At any rate, while I was there, I met again my friend Jim Haynes, who was one of the people who'd started International Times. And in the course of conversation, he mentioned video. And I sort of instinctively knew what it was. It was like the solution waiting for the question. So I got back to England as quickly as I could, went to see Sony and talked them into lending me an open reel Portapack, which was a bit of a clumsy thing, the recorder and you know what those Portapacks were like.
Both used them.
And that was the point where my interest in video began.
What sort of things did you say to Sony to convince them? Did you tell them that you would use it for particular purposes, or that you were going to explore its potential, make your discoveries available to them in some way, or what was the deal?
Well, if you'd like to stop the recording, it'll take me 5 minutes to find the proposal that I made to Sony that did that.
Yeah.
Okay. And what was the date roughly?
It must have been early 69. What I saw was that it was in a new medium.
Yeah.
And it was unexplored. And that meant that rather than having to accept a conventional approach, as in film, it was wide open as to what you did with it. There were no boundaries at all.
But you previously read Clue and cybernetic cybernetic theory and so on. So you already had some theoretical ideas that probably you wanted to test out in relation to this new medium. Is that a fair characterization?
It's fairly near the nerve. When you reconstruct things from memory, you tend to streamline them and make them look perhaps more causal than they actually are. And you see big signs. But one of the, before I started working with video in 1969, one of the last things that I did in the psychedelic era, if you like, was to start an information service called BIT. I had the idea, rather naive, I think, that if information was free, the world would automatically become a better place. I don't really necessarily hold on to that any longer. But what we found with International Times was that there was a huge demand for information, and the switchboard was jammed a lot of the time with people asking, how do I get to India by foot, or what's the price of dope, can I have a crash pad, can you direct me to somebody in Netherlands, whatever you can think of, people were asking for it.
Yeah. So you became the internet immediately?
Yeah. No. I started this information service called BIT and allowed it to develop, and took some, made some observations while this was happening. We came to the conclusion that the way to treat media could be to start with the medium rather than start with the rules. I'm not expressing that very well.
I think you are, actually. I think that's really clear.
But if you lead with the medium, then you're working in a completely generalised way with the idea of media. And this puts you in quite a powerful position if you're doing any sort of analysis. Because the tools that are available for one medium then become available for another. I'm sure that I could put that more succinctly.
Well, I think as you talk, the ideas will unfold. It doesn't have to be put succinctly within one statement, because it's not about a soundbite. It's about how the thoughts mesh with each other, isn't it? And how this evolved as an approach.
Yeah. At any rate, having borrowed for a couple of months the first porta pack to arrive in England or in Europe. Around that instrument, slowly they gathered a cloud of enthusiasts. All of whom were attracted by, I think the first thing that you find out with video, and I think it's still the case, is that you see yourself. You see yourself. It's the instant reflexivity that is what makes it different, or what made it different. I mean, nowadays everybody's got their exactly, and there are cameras in them, and I often hear on the radio about the democratization. they probably said that about the telephone. Maybe they said it about Morse code.
Well, they probably said it about writing, about printing.
Yeah, back with old Gutenberg.
Yeah.
But I think that that's what's happening now. Is the first wave of recognition, and I don't know. And there's 4 billion people in the world, or is it 6, or is it 8?
I've lost count.
But a good many of them have got their mobiles,
Yeah.
and we'll see what happens next.
The jury's out.
Well, the social processes are starting to roll, and nobody quite knows how to evaluate them. But it's a very interesting time. Meanwhile, back in 1970.
Yes. Yeah. How did you go from the Portapack you had to turn back into Sony to carrying on with video?
Well, let me see. You have to be careful not to point the camera at the sun, because it left a burn on the tube. And Sony told us that when I borrowed the Portapack from them. And of course, one of my friends went and burnt a hole in the tube.
Of course.
I was a bit embarrassed, but not enough to stop doing it.
So this moment of reflectivity, though, it was quite mind-blowing, wasn't it? I mean, it was for me.
Oh yeah, I remember being on an acid trip in a van run by a guy called Sheldon, who was an American adventurer, and I saw for the first time, he came in from Heathrow and came to the Roundhouse, and he was shooting video from his specially adapted van. And I remember seeing that in this van parked outside the Roundhouse and being completely astonished. And I wrote down in my notebook, "Video is a living thing." And I spent the last 40 years trying to figure out what that means. No, because it really is interesting. It's like here we are face to face in a room. We can touch each other, and then you're over the other side of town, and there's an element that if we're in touch with each other, we are so, but in a diluted way compared to face to face. And if you're the other side of the world, it doesn't make very much difference, unless you want to be face to face, in which case you travel at the speed of light or slightly slower. I mean, I lost the thread of what I was talking about.
You were talking about being a living thing.
Oh yeah.
And you've been trying to
I've been trying to answer the question: what sort of living thing is video? Because you look at the screen, and then that's like a proscenium arch. Not of a theatrical performance, but of a whole aspect of your life. And we still don't seem to have the right descriptive language for that intermediation.
Yes. Well, for me, it always seemed like it was another kind of space, a particular kind of electronic space that didn't exist anywhere else. It was a particular manifestation of space. That's what got me quite excited.
Yeah, right. Well, so in '69, I went to California with my then wife, and I made a beeline for a guy called Bryce Howard, who ran a project called the National Centre for Experiments in Television. And I was completely taken with this. because he was being creative on a level mainly with cable TV. But he was being creative in a way that I hadn't seen in Europe at all, and particularly not inside of the BBC. So Bryce gave me a manuscript called Video Space, which is this sort of almost mystical piece of writing that came out of this National Centre for Experiments in Television. I came back to England completely thrilled with what I'd seen. What I saw was a piece of colour video where a seagull was flying through a living room by superimposing, but the effect was astonishing, because I never imagined that you could do something like that, and that set me thinking that there was far more to the medium than just running around Notting Hill with a porta pack, shooting revolutionary things, which it was great. Street theatre, handheld street theatre in 1969 was really something, because it was all new. But I having been to Bryce Howard, I felt inspired about what one might do, and so the next thing that I tried, when the opportunity arose, which was fairly soon after getting back, was to produce or stage a happening in a TV studio. One of the people who was in contact with us was a producer at the BBC. BBC Two had recently started, and they had small colour studios. And the guy's name was Tom Corcoran. And he encouraged us to get together an experimental production which we called Video Space. And it was Video Space, the production was born out of this rather nebulous but intense group of people at the London New Arts Lab. That led to a studio booking at the BBC and two 10-minute takes, two 20-minute takes of an experimental happening that we call Video Space. So that's how all that links up.
Were those, so you did two recordings, two 10-minute sessions,
yeah, and
from that there was something produced, something on tape?
Two 20-minute sessions.
Two 20-minute tapes. Were they aired, or I know you've shown them, in kind of gallery context.
No, they weren't aired, but they were sufficient for the BBC to commission us to do. I think they called them visualizations. We probably call them promos now. We did one for a band called Area Codes
514.
No, it's not. It's 416, I think. Anyway, it's somewhere out in the West Coast. Right. That's the name of the band. And that went down quite well. Except that we overplayed our hand, because what we hadn't realised was that TV as a broadcast medium is one with hardly any feedback. And when we knew that our Area Code 615 promo was going to be broadcast, we got all our friends to phone up the BBC as it was happening and say how good they thought it was. And the BBC were outraged because the medium doesn't work like that.
Right.
So there's something foul play going on.
And yet, of course, now there's a duty officer for precisely that reason, to receive those calls, yeah?
Yeah,
But this is the BBC in 1969, 1970.
that's right. Anyway, so Video Space was successful in producing a couple of commissions, but after the first commission had happened, and
So hold on, to understand. So you made those things, and they were broadcast.
Well, one was.
Or one was broadcast, yeah?
Video Space 20 Minutes was not broadcast.
Yeah.
Tell Me You Love Me by Zappa and Area Code 615
Okay.
were broadcast, and they were short things, but after the second one, which was Zappa, was broadcast, some of our gang made further feedback into the BBC of a kind that the BBC recognised as being something wrong, and they didn't invite us anymore.
What a shame.
Well, I mean, if you look back with the hindsight of karma, we didn't exploit that opportunity in the best possible way. It's a polite way of saying we fucked up. And there were some other fuck-ups in those early days. The Frost show was
What's the fraud? So what happened? Did you do some guerrilla activity?
yeah. Some yippies came over. I think this was in about 1971, some year like that. A bunch of yippies came over and got involved in whatever was going on at the time. And one of the things was the David Frost show, where they invited some hippies to come and be on the show. You know, they're called celebrities nowadays. And a gang of people led by Felix Dennis went along, and as soon as the transmission, which was live, started to walk around the studio and insulting Frost and generally breaking up the format, and this was broadcast. It was very entertaining, and Frost looked really pissed off. But with the long sight of history, he made a fortune out of that, because that intervention was syndicated all over the world. So who was the winner?
Were you involved directly with that?
Yeah, but I wasn't there myself.
No.
I mean, some of my gang went along.
But so there was this interest in the possibility of broadcast, but it seems that there were a number of avenues of interest that you had. One of them was you recognised the potential of this video space through the Bryce Howard experience. You were using the Portapack in the street theatre sort of way, and you were looking at the possibility of broadcast and breaking down some of the more traditional conventions of the broadcast situation. So those were quite distinct but related activities, all connected to video in different
yes, and there's also art.
Yeah, tell us about that.
And there's social applications of the medium.
Yeah, yeah. So you were interested in all of those things, and you saw they cross-connected with each other in some way.
Yeah, definitely. We had a bit of an altercation with Dave Hall about that, who had very strong ideas about what constituted art. I think we both mellowed now in time.
I don't know if he's ever mellowed, to be honest, but...
Well, give him the benefit of the doubt.
All right.
But there were...
when did the Crash exhibition happen? Where are we in the mix?
Let me give you some background to it's Ballard, right?
Yeah.
Slab.
The original Arts Lab was started by Jim Haynes and Jack Henry Moore, a couple of Americans, who previously had been running a bookshop in Edinburgh. They squatted or acquired somehow a building in Drury Lane, up the Oxford Street end, and started to run all-night scenes there, an all-night cafe, bookshop. You could catch sexually transmitted disease if you wanted.
If you wanted.
And because it was a bit of a doss house as well. People needed a place to sleep. Nothing wrong with that. Then the Arts Lab, which incidentally began the Arts Lab movement, which spread all over the country rather fast, it attracted a number of what you might call individual artists. I mean, I'm one, you're one, who felt that there wasn't really room for them in Drury Lane to express what they wanted to do. And so now I'm talking about we, a group of artists around about 25. Through the agencies of a conservative local councillor called Christine, the name will come back to me, managed to get possession, temporary, of an old fire station at number 1 Robert Street, just north of the Euston Road. And Christine Stewart Monroe, she was conservative. And we managed to get the disused fire station, all 5 stories of it, or 4 stories, for about 2 or 3 years, until it was due to be demolished for rebuilding that block. In other words, it was one of the holes in the infrastructure caused by the long-term planning of housing renewal. Another version of that is squat. We got a license on the fire station for something like £1 a year. It was fantastic. But that was legitimate as compared to what we're going to come to next. So here's this fire station. It was cold. It was in the middle of winter. It was glorious. The 25 artists, in small groups or as individuals, managed to occupy the whole of the fire station at Robert Street, and which became the new Arts Lab. So there was, like, from the original Arts Lab, opportunities to move to a more permanent place, to the new Arts Lab, which was more a collection of artists, I say with egos, than the original Arts Lab.
Okay. When you say artists, they were artists in the broadest sense because they were interested in exploring new media. It weren't a load of painters all in there. There were people who were interested in all kinds of different possibilities.
Yes, the Computer Arts Society had a space there.
Right.
There was a theatre which was built inside of one of the floors.
Music? Music as well?
Music was a bit of a problem because of the spread of sound to neighbouring buildings. But I mean, I remember Hawkwind practising there,
really?
Rehearsing there, in about 73, pardon me. And all sorts of things went on there, but basically there was an exhibition space on the ground floor, which is where Ballard Crash Cars was. Also on the ground floor there was the Filmmakers Co-op cinema.
Ah, okay.
And the Filmmakers Co-op started with the original Arts Lab and sort of, it's sort of like cell division group. And then...
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because what I've been thinking whilst you've been making that description is that is there in some way that video was applicable to practically every other art form?
Yeah, but every other art form was busy being itself as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there were some cross-fertilizations, but on the whole, in that era, in those several years, in like 1970 to 73, that sort of time, the Institute for Research in Art and Technology,
Which you set up.
well, that was an alternative name for the London New Arts Lab. We thought it would be advisable to have a straight name.
Right.
And it worked. Sorry, go back to...
So who was involved with that, with IRAD then?
Well, with the department of IRAD that I was responsible for was called TVX. We chose the name, and that was the name of our video activity. The original people who started TVX, the first thing we did was in Notting Hill to make a proposal for community television. And there were three of us. There was me, there was a barrister called Joe Bear, and there was a German energetic guy called Tillman Roman was his name.
Tillman Roman.
And the three of us wrote together a proposal in 1969 for community television based on the experience that we had with Sony.
What determined the idea of community? How did that happen? Suddenly we got to community television. Where did that come from? The notion, who named it? What's the genesis of that?
It's a good question. I think it's because we were interested in community or communities, and in television as a medium. Community television seemed to be a natural conjunction of ideas.
Is that related though, because you talk occasionally about having a straight name for stuff to represent yourselves to the system, to prize open the money box and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But is there a proposition in the community video idea that it's an alternative or a countercultural behaviour, or?
Well, I have to look in the file and see what it says, but we identified a space where there was no activity, which seemed to be which could benefit from some. It's the model of the International Times.
Right.
Okay.
Taken to a different medium.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But you make a distinction. At that time, you were making a distinction between using video as a new medium, as a tool to explore new possible ideas through a fresh medium, through approaching fresh medium. The television as a possible venue for some of this stuff, and then art making, which is a complete other strand, isn't it? I mean,
well, we didn't see art making as being a complete other strand.
Okay.
I mean, we'd heard about KQED and WNET, and we thought that what was going on in America was an example of what could be going on in England but wasn't.
And what did you hear, by the way? What was it that you were hearing? So around about 1971. 72.
Ed Emshweiler. Some people on the East Coast, around, I think it's WNET. KQED was on the West Coast.
Yeah.
WNET's Boston, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
But the reason they existed was because there were these monolithic American broadcasters who controlled just about all of television in America, and then there were these little other
Public television.
Yeah, this little public television outcries, which actually were, interestingly enough, kind of looking at the BBC in a sense and seeing, this alternative to commercial television, weren't they? So it was as if there was stuff going in both directions at some level.
Yeah, there wasn't much coming on a level that we could understand as art. I speak for myself personally. But there was enough of it shining through the cracks in the infrastructure.
Right.
To know that there was something interesting going on there. I mean, people would travel backwards and forwards across the Atlantic. It wasn't like an impenetrable barrier. We might come to that later on.
Yeah, because you actually did go across and draw inspiration and experience and come back with it
Right, so,
several times.
Yeah, so the places that I drew the experience from, and I wasn't the only person to do it, was the National Film Board of Canada and their program Challenge for Change, which was it was to do with supporting small communities and using film and video to see how their situation can be improved. Dorothy Todd Hayno was the English language coordinator, and Robert Forget was the French language coordinator. And they're both really sort of movers and shakers within the social program of the National Film Board of Canada. George Stoney was associated with them. I think he was based in the States at the time, but he was a well-known activist and filmmaker. Those are the Canadian roots. There was video in Vancouver, which was a bunch of lively anarchists.
Did you go across to Vancouver as well?
No, I didn't.
What about Europe, mainland Europe? Was anything happening coming out of there at all?
Well, I should explain first of all that how I got to go to Montreal and New York was we were commissioned by the Home Office via the University of Southampton to do some research that we called Video in Community Development, which became a standard work in this country. And what I did, I went to the National Film Board of Canada and visited various video projects in the New York area as part of the research to enable us to present the results to the Home Office. That was followed up by several projects in England, in places like Middlesbrough and Northampton, where the use of video for community development was actually tried out. I can't report to you about the results.
Well, when you went to these places, did you interview people? Did you make use of video as part of the process? Did you take photographs?
We made use mainly of cybernetic concepts, because every project was different. The objectives were different, the audiences were different. The main problem with the conceptual research was that to find a way to put these all side by side in a way where somebody could flip through the report and immediately get a good overview of how these of how video could be used in different ways with different projects. I mean, I have a copy of that in one of the files that I brought out a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
There's another thing though in this, because I'm thinking, because this gets dry, this stuff, doesn't it? Because you get to a point where there's the countercultural roots, effectively, of the thing, and then there's the money thing where one gets into a bit of research, and you want to open the community chest to get the money out of it. But then there's this whole history of an imperative of rock and roll, which you mentioned before, but you haven't mentioned it at all up to now. So I just thought we should.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see. There's so many strands to this. I mean, I can see that you were involved on so many different levels that I hadn't realised how complicated a pattern it was.
Yeah, true. I mean, this music runs like a golden thread throughout the 60s, whether you're into video or not.
Yes.
And then on into the 70s.
Because when we were speaking last time, you mentioned this idea of people putting money into things, that some of these rock stars actually being interested enough in the medium to finance something or to make something available. And you said there were some key people in that respect. And I think I remember you saying that Lennon and Yoko, for example, but then you mentioned Pete Townsend and you mentioned a third person. Was it one of the Stones?
Mick Jagger.
Mick Jagger, yeah. And those people were at some level interested enough to either make equipment available or to loan equipment or use
I
it.
think that the relation between the rock stars and the medium were such that there's something happening over here. It could be interesting. Why don't we throw some money at it and see what happens? I mean, I think that in modern times, Damien Albarn may have used the same sort of approach to how to raise money from rock and roll sources.
Well, it's funny you should mention him because you know his father, I guess, right? He's having an exhibition in the town where I'm living now, coming up, which you should come to, I think, because he was involved with cybernetic serendipity, wasn't he? But he was also very interested in computers for art making.
I'm sure you're right. I can't claim any familiarity.
Okay.
With that particular.
So who was the first rock star, effectively, that made something available? Who kind of sticks out right at the beginning?
Well, the Stones in the Park.
Right.
That was 69, was it? No,
that was 69.
Yeah. Okay. So what happened there?
Well, it was shortly after Brian Jones died, and the concert was already scheduled. It was promoted by a bunch of people called Black Hill Enterprises, which was basically Peter Jenner and Andrew King, who later became the first managers of Pink Floyd. So it was nice and cosy from that point of view. Ask me another. Well, I don't know exactly how the detail of how the Stones came to be playing in the park, promoted by Black Hill Enterprises.
Oh.
But I do know that started a whole series of performances in the park and elsewhere, which gave a boost to the early growth of the festival movement.
But did you shoot that though? The Stones in the park?
I shot Stones in the Park, and the tape has been lost or erased, bulk erased. It's a great shame.
But were you asked to do it, or did you turn up?
I was asked to do it by Black Hill Enterprises,
Yeah.
who happen to be friends of mine anyway.
Yeah.
Notting Hill runs quite deep. And I had the Sony Porta Pack that I borrowed from Sony, and there was enough videotape to shoot from a single camera in black and white, 405 lines. For the Stones in the Park, I think it took 3 reels. A reel was about 25 minutes, I think, in those days.
Just under 30 minutes, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So was it one camera? Were there just...
Oh, the main production was done by Granada TV with a 3 or 4 camera setup,
Right.
conventionally. I don't know if it was video. I think it was probably on film, because those are the days of 16mm film. And that is a stock item in the world's video libraries.
But you were using video to record. For example, I asked you about Lifehouse, and I heard the other day that you went along to the rehearsals at the Young Vic. You were there with a crew of people with porta packs. I got the impression.
The story has been exaggerated by time. We had one porta pack,
Right.
and Pete Townsend asked us if we wanted to come and shoot some rehearsal. I don't remember what for.
It was Lifehouse.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when we got there, there wasn't really quite enough light, so it didn't come out very well.
Right.
But it aroused Pete Townsend's interest, and I think something like this happened, that he was given a bill for £50, which was in those days worth having, remember? And replied by handing back a cheque for £500.
Brilliant.
And that was the sort of the good spirit. Names and numbers have been altered to protect the innocent. I can't remember exactly, but it was that.
But you said also that John Lennon had given you a pack to shoot Yoko Ono, yeah?
Yeah, that's a bit concatenated. But basically, the third porta pack to arrive in the country was owned by John and Yoko, who weren't quite sure what to do with it. And to cut a long story short, three of the 4 Beatles had been given these huge 2-inch VCRs. No, I remember they 1-inch, pardon me, which weighed a fortune. They weighed hundreds of weights. And the Beatles didn't know what to do with them, and so 3 of the 4 Beatles gave their Ampex tank to us. That goes in a different direction, but John and Yoko asked us to film using their porta pack, the concert at the Lyceum where Yoko was singing. I think it was a Plastic Ono band.
Yeah.
And her singing was absolutely atrocious. It was like a tomcat yowling from the roof. It really was terrible. There wasn't enough light to record the vision properly. And I suppose that I could see there's a sort of karmic balance. We lost the Stones, but thank God we lost Yoko.
So to summarise that period you were about to say.
It started in April '69.
And went on until about...
Could you say that, because I've lost it.
Sorry, yeah.
Let's rephrase the question so that you're up on the energy.
Yeah.
Again.
Okay.
So to pull together the thinking and the feelings of that first period of video, and as you call it, a love affair.
Yeah, that love affair with a new medium.
How did it feel? How can you characterise for us the feeling of that new realisation?
Well, I think you have to look at the different eras. The first era would be from early '69 through to late '73, and there was a lot of unplanned activity with people exploring social, artistic possibilities of video, portable video as a medium. What happened in late '73 was that after seemingly years of trying, we managed to buy our own porta pack. It cost about £1,000. And who the we was by that time was Sue Hall and myself. And the video story doesn't hang together unless you put her efforts in balance with mine. Because she was the business brain that was needed to knit together with the artistic side, if you like, or the social artistic side. And so that by 1980, what started as like one porta pack in 1970 had blossomed into lots of groups having video of one sort or another, and for ourselves, we managed to create Fantasy Factory, which was a common carrier post-production system set up especially for artists and non-commercial people. And that was the result of the activity in the first era.
So it became formulated, and you conceptualised it into a thing that had to be done. Is that right?
Well, I suppose so. I mean, the combination of the people who are using it and what their objectives were produced a set of, if you like, of projects, whether imaginary or real, what people thought they were doing. For instance, one of them is London Video Arts, which started really in about, I think about '72. And they...
Maybe a bit later.
A bit later than that, I think. Hoppy.
74-ish or something?
Well, maybe you're right. I don't have a good grip of the dates.
Not to worry. But you saw that as something parallel and different from what you were doing, yes? Or not really?
Well, yes. In 1975 at the Serpentine Video Show, organised by Peter Block, which conveniently assembled examples of all the different sorts of video that there were in the country. not commercial, but creative, if you like. And that was a very good thing because it became a reference point for what happened next. But in my own experience, from 69 to 73 was a sort of open-ended, unconstrained experimentation, some of which was interesting and some of which wasn't interesting. And in 73, when Sue Hall arrived on the scene, there was a different energy that started to come out, which is the energy of, well, I hesitate to use the word, but cybernetic reasoning